frost cracked under Arthur Miller's boots on the packed dirt of Miller Ranch, Nebraska Territory, 1888. A small hand closed around his coat sleeve before he reached the gate. "Don't talk. Follow me." He stopped. He did not turn his head. His eyes stayed fixed on the black stagecoach waiting 50 feet away, its lanterns still lit against the gray morning. The girl at his side was Ellie, 10 years old, daughter of Tess, the widow who ran his kitchen. Her fingers dug into the wool of his coat like she meant to leave marks. "Ellie," he said quietly, "I have a train to catch. If you get in that coach," she whispered, "you won't come back." The words landed somewhere behind his ribs and stayed there. Arthur had buried 2 business partners and outlived 3 winters that should have killed him. He had learned, the hard way, never to move on instinct. But Ellie's grip did not loosen, and her eyes did not blink, and there was something in her stillness that no 10-year-old should carry. He looked at the coach again, really looked this time. The driver sat high on the box in a brown duster, a battered felt hat pulled low. From a distance, he could have been Charles, Arthur's foreman of 5 years, same broad shoulders, same lazy slouch in the saddle seat. But Charles wore a silver ring on his left hand, a gift from his mother, and he never took it off, not even to wash for supper. The man on the box wore thick leather gloves. Arthur's stomach turned to ice water. "Walk with me," he said, slow, toward the stables. "Don't look back at the gate." They crossed the yard together, past the water trough, into the shadow of the barn. Only when the coach was out of sight did Arthur kneel down to meet the girl's eyes. "Tell me everything. Don't skip a word." Ellie's breath came out shaky, but her voice held steady, the way a soldier's daughter's voice holds steady. "Last night, past midnight, I went to bank the fires in the main house. I heard voices in the parlor, your wife, and a man I never heard before." Arthur's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. "Miss Molly told him the route was set. She said you always pull the curtains and read your ledgers, and you wouldn't notice Charles wasn't driving until it was too late." The barn seemed to grow smaller around him. "She said a wagon went over the edge at Oker's Run 2 winters back. Said nobody found the bodies till the spring thaw." Somewhere behind Arthur's sternum, a low buzzing started, the kind he felt just before a rattlesnake struck near his boot. He kept his face flat. He had built an empire on never flinching first. "Is that all?" Ellie reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small leather-bound book, its cover soft with wear. "The man dropped this on the porch. I took it before anyone saw." Arthur opened it with 2 fingers, careful, like it might bite him. Names, dates, numbers written in a heavy, slanted hand. On the last page, his own name, Arthur Miller, Mountain Pass, 10,000 up front. He did not finish reading the rest. He closed the ledger and slid it into his coat pocket, and when he looked back at Ellie, something in his face had already changed, gone flat and cold and very still, like a lake right before it freezes solid. "You saved my life this morning," he said. "Do you understand that?" Ellie nodded, though her chin trembled. "Go back to your mother's cabin. Tell her your stomach's turned. Don't mention me. Don't mention the carriage. If anyone asks, you haven't seen me since yesterday." "Yes, sir." He watched her slip away through the shadows between the cabins, small and fast and gone. Arthur stood alone behind the barn, the ledger heavy against his chest like a stone dropped into still water. He turned toward the main house instead of the coach. Somewhere behind that door, his wife was waiting with a smile he had trusted for 5 years. He was about to find out exactly how much that smile had cost him. The grandfather clock in the foyer ticked against the silence as Arthur stepped through his own front door. Molly stood by the bay window in the parlor, sunlight catching the fine black stitching of her dress. She turned at the sound of his boots. and her face bloomed into that same soft, familiar smile she had worn every morning for 5 years. "Arthur," she said, "I thought you'd already left. The driver's been waiting." He studied her the way he studied a man across a negotiating table. No flicker, no crack in the porcelain. "Forgot the grazing deeds," he said. "Can't meet the buyers in Denver without them." "Shall I help you look?" "No need. I know exactly where they are." He crossed the room and kissed her cheek, breathing in the rose water she always wore. Then he walked past her, through the kitchen, out the back door, and into the tall orchard grass, moving fast now that her eyes were no longer on him. Charles was on his porch when Arthur came out of the trees, a rifle across his knees, his boots off. "Boss, you're supposed to be halfway to the station. Why aren't you driving my coach this morning?" Charles frowned. "Got a telegram yesterday, said you'd hired private transport out of Blackwater. Told me to take 2 days' rest." "I sent no telegram." The color drained out of Charles's face. He stood, picked up his rifle, and racked the lever in one motion. "Who's on the box right now?" "A dead man," Arthur said quietly, "if he stays there long enough." They rode the ridge trail into Valentine, staying under the pines, avoiding the main road. 40 minutes later, they slipped through the back door of a brick building with a sign that read, "Hosea Matthews, Attorney at Law." Hosea set down his coffee the moment he saw Arthur's face. "Lock the door, Charles." Arthur laid the ledger on the desk and told him everything, start to finish, in flat, clipped sentences. Hosea listened without interrupting, adjusting his spectacles as he studied the handwriting. When Arthur finished, the room held nothing but the sound of wagons rattling past outside. "I pulled your will from the bank vault last week," Hosea said. "Molly requested it. Said she wanted everything in order before your trip." "I never asked for that." "I know, but as your wife, she has standing. If you die, Arthur, all of it goes to her. Land, cattle, rail shares, nearly $1 million. Once the mourning period passes, she could sell it off and vanish." Charles leaned against the wall, arms folded. "Who's the man in the ledger?" Hosea was already turning to his filing cabinet. "I know a Pinkerton out of Blackwater owes me a favor. Let me wire him." "Quietly," Arthur said. By afternoon, the answer came back on a strip of telegraph paper, and Hosea's face went tight as he read it. "His name is Micah Bell. Not just a gun for hire. He's an inheritance man. Finds a discontented spouse, helps stage the accident, takes his cut. 2 similar deaths in New Hover already. Both widows disappeared with him a year later." Charles's hand drifted to his revolver. "Say the word, boss. I'll drag him off that box myself." "No," Arthur said. "Kill him, and Molly plays the grieving widow. She still gets everything, and we hang for murder. We need them caught in the act." He walked to the map pinned on Hosea's wall and traced the stage road with one finger, stopping at a sharp bend marked Oker's Run. "We let them try again." That evening, Arthur rode back through his own gates as the sky bled orange over the ridgeline. He walked into a dining room warm with candlelight, a roast steaming at the center of the table, and Molly already seated, her face arranged into worried relief. "Arthur, I was beginning to fear the worst." "Lost track of time at the surveyor's post," he said, taking his seat. "I'll take the coach tomorrow, first light." Her shoulders eased. "That's wonderful news." They ate together. She spoke of curtains ordered from a catalog in Sandon. He nodded at the right moments, and the food tasted like ash in his mouth, and somewhere beneath the candlelight he understood, with a quiet and total certainty, that the woman across from him had already spent his funeral money twice over in her mind. At midnight, the house fell silent. Arthur lay awake, staring at the ceiling beams while the wind rattled the window panes. Down near the stables, Charles sat wrapped in a blanket, rifle across his knees, watching the dark window of Tess and Ellie's cabin until the sky finally turned pale gray at the edges. At 6, the coach waited at the gate, frost thick on the ground. Molly stood on the porch in her shawl, waving as Arthur climbed the step and pulled the heavy door shut behind him. He did not draw the curtains. He did not open his ledgers. He unbuttoned his coat, drew his cavalry revolver from its holster, and rested it quietly across his knee as the wheels began to turn beneath him, carrying him toward the high, narrow pass at Ochre's Run. The road climbed steep now, pines pressing close on either side, the air thinning with every turn of the wheels. Ochre's Run opened ahead, a narrow shelf of dirt hugging the cliff face, rock wall on the left, a 300-foot drop into rushing water on the right. The carriage slowed, the wheels locked, the horses stamped and blew steam into the cold, sensing the edge beneath their hooves. Above him, boots hit the dirt. Footsteps moved along the side of the carriage, unhurried, almost lazy. Arthur's thumb found the hammer of his revolver and held it there. The door swung open. Micah Bell stood framed against the pale sky, pistol raised, a scar pulling his grin sideways. "End of the line, Mr. Miller." Arthur did not raise his hands. He looked past the barrel, into the man's eyes, and kept his voice low and even. "You should look behind you." Micah's grin faltered. Rock slid somewhere above them. "Drop it!" The voice cracked across the ravine. Micah spun toward the ridge, where 3 men stood with rifles leveled, dark coats snapping in the wind, silver badges catching the light. Agent Joel stood center, his face carved from stone. Before Micah could bring his pistol around, a shadow dropped from the roof of the carriage. Charles hit him square in the back and drove him face first into the frozen dirt. The pistol fired once into open air, the shot rolling out across the canyon and dying somewhere far below. Charles hauled Micah up by the collar and slammed him against the carriage wheel, rifle barrel pressed hard under his chin. "Give me a reason. Just twitch." Micah's eyes darted from Charles to the men closing in from the ridge, then finally settled on Arthur, who stepped out of the carriage and buttoned his coat against the wind. "You're a long way from Sandon, Mr. Bell." Micah spat blood into the dirt, still trying to force the grin back onto his face. "You think you're smart, Miller? Your own wife bought the ticket. She paid me herself." "I know," Arthur said. He nodded to Joel, who stepped forward with iron cuffs. "He won't fall off any cliffs on the way to Blackwater," Joel said. "He's going to hang, and before he does, he's going to tell a judge every name on that list." Arthur looked once over the edge, at the water churning white far below, then turned back toward the horses. "Let's go home, Charles." They rode through the gates by mid-afternoon to find 2 lawmen's wagons parked in front of the house and Hosea Matthews standing on the porch steps, briefcase in hand. Inside, Molly sat in the parlor with the ledgers spread across the coffee table, her face drained white. When she saw Arthur in the doorway, she rose fast, hand pressed to her mouth. "Arthur, thank God! They said the carriage was attacked. I thought you were dead." She moved toward him, arms open. He did not catch her. She stopped a foot away, arms falling slowly to her sides, searching his face for the grief she expected to find there. She found none, only a stillness that settled over the room like the air before a hard winter. "He didn't attack the carriage, Molly. Arthur said quietly. He stopped it exactly where you told him to. Her breath went shallow. I don't know what you're talking about. Someone is lying to you. Micah Bell confessed, Hosea said, stepping into the room. Full statement in exchange for his neck. He gave the Pinkertons the telegrams, too. Molly's mouth trembled. The careful, elegant mask cracked down the middle. You loved this dirt more than you ever loved me, she said, voice breaking. I just wanted my share. You had my name, Arthur said. You had my home. That was your share. He turned his back before the sheriff led her out. He did not want that to be the last thing he remembered of her face. Months later, spring came up green through the thawing mud. Arthur found Ellie sitting on a crate near the stables, a worn history book open in her lap, reading her letters aloud while her mother beat a rug on the line nearby. He handed her a thick envelope sealed in red wax. Her hands shook as she opened it, the way they had shaken that cold morning by the gate, only this time not from fear. An academy in Saint Denis, Arthur said. 4 years, paid in full. Train leaves next week. Ellie stared up at him, the envelope pressed to her chest like something made of gold. Study hard, Arthur said, tipping his hat. One day I might need someone smart enough to run my books. She smiled, bright and unbroken, and Arthur walked back toward the house with the wind warm against his face for the first time in a very long while. If a 10-year-old girl's warning saved a man's entire empire, what would you have done in Arthur's boots? Tell us in the comments below.